Okay, sorry, I'm starting this differently than usual on the technical end, so I don't actually know when this. Normally, I'm able to like press the button and be like, "All right, welcome back," but I'm not even totally positive that I'm streaming right now because it's just a new computer. But all right, looks good. Okay, so welcome back. I'm Noah Sawyer, and this is the Junto. This is episode 31, and it is Friday, March 20th, 2026. A great year for America, 2026. So I just am going to do a chill stream because this is my first time using a new computer, and that I was going to start this at 10 and I was ready to go, and I was going to jump into an attempt at a significant monologue. But then, after realizing my microphone wasn't set up right, or there was just this mysterious noise going on in the background, I was tracking that down with a friend who I'm very lucky to have helped me troubleshoot this stuff. And by the time it was over, I was like, okay, I don't feel fresh on this monologue idea anymore. And it's late, so maybe I'll just do kind of a chill stream for once. So yeah, I mean, some of the streams have been kind of chill, but I'm not a very chill person, I don't think. So yeah, I think I'll just do like sort of a preparatory version of that monologue. I'll sort of describe some of the stuff I'm thinking about, and then I will prepare something to try to just really deliver more like a lecture on Monday, something that is very direct. Because that was the idea with the show from the get-go, is to, I don't know, I was already doing lectures in person a little bit, just casually, like things hosted in my own space, and I wanted to practice more frequently, so I wanted to do this. But I don't know, it's practicing monologuing ultimately, but it's not as set as a lecture in terms of content. So I try to have things in mind as I go into it, but it's not so planned as a lecture. I think next week though I should have one or two solid and interesting lectures, because there's just a couple things that are really ringing around in my head, especially now that we are engaged and several weeks into the Iran war. Now I think so much. I'll title one of the streams "Grow Up Fast" because I am thinking about the generational failures of all of the generations since World War II, and how they have, through their negligence ultimately, and I'm not saying like everyone's awful in those generations, but there was a specific type of negligence that I will describe in the cultural sector that I think led to those generations creating the worst period in American history so far. And that's where we all get to live. So that idea of growing up fast, I want it to be, directed toward, I don't know, everyone is infantile. Even elderly people in this cultural situation are essentially adolescents, with exceptions, but there's a huge swath of the population that is really incompetent and doesn't understand what's going on in the world. And so the grow up fast thing is like, especially after the millennial generation, there was this acceptance that people would be figuring it out for a long time, figuring it out into their 30s and figuring out how to live. And that is something that I think absolutely needs to be cut off immediately. And I think actually it's desirable to promote, or desirable to engage in the opposite. And so to promote the opposite of that, that's that idea of like, it's a good idea to grow up fast for your own sake, for your whole world's sake. There's no reason to dilly-dally and live like the millennial generation did, or Gen X, or the boomers. There's an evolution, and every circumstance has been different over the past I don't know, 70 years. So we can't generalize, but we can learn a lot from the failures of previous Americans and try to counteract that. And so, yeah, I don't know. I basically, like, right before I thought I was going to start streaming, I was like, I will. Oh, yeah, I just wrote on my typewriter a 20-minute screed. I set a timer, and just to get the gears turning and get the gunk off, I did that stream of consciousness, more or less, writing exercise. And so I was ready to jump in and try to maneuver something out of that, but after all the tech issues, I just want to chill out. I'll probably read a few things, and I think I'll go over some of the topics that I want to cover, and if anyone has feedback on them or things to consider, feel free to chime in. So I don't know. I don't really want to read this because I was not planning on reading it when I was writing it. I was really writing it for myself, but part of me is tempted to just read it because, like, a lot of what I'm going for here with this stream is sincerity, and I am trying to demonstrate what it is actually like to live and try to grapple with these issues in this specific time and what that looks like at the lived level, because everything content-wise is now so polished, and it is prepared, and it's fast-paced, and it's complete or attempting to be complete, and it just doesn't resemble real life. And like I feel totally committed to this type of cultural rejuvenation project. Like that is my desire in this world, is to contribute to something like that or die trying. And despite that, it is just very hard to function in the current cultural landscape that I live in and economic landscape that I live in. And so I encounter so many difficulties, and a lot of it is psychological. Like I feel like we live in a period of time where there are extreme stresses on the psychological and the physiological mechanisms or processes of our being. So there are these extreme stresses, and we find different ways to cope with them. And sorry, I've moved things around. I feel like I'm not looking at the camera. I'm kind of looking. I'll move this. I'll move this a little more because I don't like how that comes out. I don't know. Everything's different. This is a new computer, and the operating system is different, and I'm getting used to it. This is in like 60 FPS also, which is an experiment. I don't know if I really need to go crazy like that. I don't, like I think 30 is plenty, and 30 has a charm about it. 24 even has a charm about it. But let me see here real quick. Okay. Yeah, sorry. This is like when I titled this chat chilling and hanging out in the darkest period of American history, I'm referring to what I'm doing right now. I'm just chilling and hanging out. I don't have anything profound to say about the act of chilling and hanging out. However, that is like part of, well, it's not about chilling, and but it is, there's a social dimension to what I think we all need to be doing. I think it is a social activity to try to make sense of life in this world right now, and it's just so unbelievably imperative that people take this seriously immediately. And like, we're in war with Iran. I don't really even know what else to say about it. We're in war with Iran. Our entire population is becoming brain dead in certain dimensions. There are certain dimensions in which people are having mental abilities atrophied and ultimately taken away from them. They're like, remember when it was just about search engines and it was before AI and people would just look things up all the time. If they couldn't remember it in the first few seconds, they would jump in and look it up. Or if there was a conversation transpiring and someone just wonders something out loud, someone else might look it up or they might look it up. That became very common. That started to atrophy the recall ability of people, as well as the sort of investigatory ability of people. You don't think about the possibilities. You're like, well, I can know for sure right now, so let me just jump in and find out for sure. And now with the AI technology that's available to people, so much of their other creative labor is being removed from them, even if it's something that seems so unimportant, like writing an email at work. When you actually stop doing that, you are losing your ability to articulate those types of things, and you're probably losing your ability to articulate in other types of scenarios as well. So obviously, I think things are really sad right now, and it is highly politically concerning because there's no guarantee that the current political order remains the way that we are used to. I think that was a major issue with millennials. I could maybe go down the line with everybody, but with millennials, and I'm perhaps a millennial. I was born a few months before 1997, so I could be the last millennial. But like so that was a time, basically in every generation since World War II in the United States, everyone has had a relative access to wealth that was unusual in human history. And it wasn't just to wealth, it was to information. It was to, I mean, I guess you could reduce everything to wealth and information, but, or, you know, not literally, but in everything I was considering. So after that period, and the United States is the obvious total victor of World War II because it's the only country that was really involved that didn't have it. Its territory was not war-torn by the end of it. All the war was further away, and you reap benefits when every other country in the world essentially has been torn apart in one way or another by war. You are able to exert your influence in a new way. And obviously this begins the Cold War era because the Soviet Union was the runner-up to that. But anyway, so you wind up with people in a society, and I think what we lacked in every one of these generations was some sort of, I haven't tried to name this idea before in my life, but as I was doing my typewriter screed, I was thinking about it, and it's almost like a watch guard, for like a cultural watch guard was lacking in the United States after World War II on the side of the people, or even on the side of the premise of the government. And I think for the boomers, a lot of what happened was getting wrapped up in the proto-consumerism that would then become hyper-consumerism. And they also, everyone, I mean, most times when I hear people talk about boomer relatives, they talk about emotional inability to articulate emotions or to live in a way that is emotionally tapped in. It is sort of, it created a superficial and commodified type of culture, which would then continue to be developed. And what the cultural watch guard concept means to me here is that if you have, it's something I really developed just more thinking about our specific moment, where we are connected to everybody through the internet. We have access to all the information on the internet. We have access to verbally intelligent information processing software that's easy to use and can facilitate a lot of knowledge improvement. If you don't just, what's the word? Shit. There's totally a word for this. Apologies, but you're putting if you don't put your personal labor into the machine and let it work for you, but you instead utilize that machine as a tool properly in this information landscape, and you coordinate with other people wherever they may be in the world to understand the moment and reap the benefits of being connected to all this information. That is an idea of a watchguard, because you have people, when that is the case, you have people who are paying attention to how power moves in the society and are paying attention to what the culture is in the society. They're paying attention to how it is changing and how the powers of the world are changing it. So I think that is something that all previous generations after World War II utterly failed to do, and for various reasons. And I don't think things are just over now. I think things are more unpredictable than ever now. However, it is also terrifying just how much power has been accumulated. And the other thing that is more terrifying to me is that some of us now are shaking off this century of influence, or I have a book over there called Century of Spin about public relations and corporate advertising and influence and manipulation. And this century of psychological trickery, psychological techniques to mold the population, we're kind of waking up to that now and learning how to protect ourselves from that, because you really can guard the self. You really can separate yourself from, I mean, it's not like you separate yourself entirely, but you learn how to not be wounded by it. I believe we can all learn that, and that is the purpose of the guard, so to speak, is to offer those tools to anyone who would want to join up with it. So yeah, the thing that concerns me is people are sort of waking up to that now. Obviously, it's not the majority of people, but it's sort of like we're waking up at the very last second before like someone kills us in our sleep. So the reason I look at it that way is because now with this verbally intelligent AI, it is no longer so important that powerful people or organizations are able to sway the opinions of other people. There are two different things happening. So there's I guess preliminarily, the media was so important, and so it was so important to capture by any interest group that wants to influence the society, because then you are changing the voting system of the society, and then you start changing the institutions in the society, not even just government institutions, or, well, in theory, I'm thinking of even just like public schools. You wind up changing public schools, and this has all been being molded since the beginning of this country, which was a genuine experiment in popular government. So basically, I want that as a backdrop, which is media has been important because you had to sway people in order to control the future of the society, which obviously people have always wanted to do. So from there, where we are now is at a weird inflection point. So an inflection point is where something changes. It's the point where the change really just flips over. Things are different on the other side. Something is fundamentally different on the other side of the inflection point. And it feels like we are reaching that for the importance of manipulation of people. And I think that is for two reasons. A, because no longer do you really need to sway people in order to control them, because of automated weaponry, essentially, because of automated tools and verbally intelligent software. It is now approaching a period where it's not so important that, the king used to he had to coerce his soldiers or convince his underlings in one way or another. There was a structure to the society. There was loyalty baked into the culture for a reason, to sustain the military core of the state, the security core of the state. So now it's seeming like it's not so important, and instead of making people overly convinced of certain things, of party loyalty or whatever it is, it seems kind of like people are just being dumbed down to the limit to see how dumb you can make people and then enforce conformity to the society through intelligent autonomous systems. That is the thing that's concerning. So I described that as like we're kind of waking up to psychological influence, but it's like there's a knife like right here, full force coming in, and we just have to be like Jackie Chan basically and just like actually push it away, which I do have hope for. I think that that is what we should all be pushing ourselves to work toward with our whole lives. I don't really see another reason to live at this point. I mean, it is literally give me liberty or give me death. There are innovations in slavery occurring right now in the global order. And I think that's something we have to reckon with. I don't think things are only ever just going to get better. I think things could get unimaginably worse. I think the future could look so alien to us by the end of the next millennium. It probably necessarily will look alien to us, but you have to imagine the good ending is that people continue to be people, that people are able to maintain governments that maintain the right to the dignity of the human person in the world. And I believe that we have power. All power up until this point has been coming through or coming from the metabolism of the human person and the decisions of human people. But yeah, it's a tricky situation. Anyway, yeah, so that's just a little bit of what I was going to talk about next week. I will organize it more. Like I said, I'm just chilling. I'm just thinking out loud, even more than usual. So let's see. Yeah, I don't know. It's disturbing stuff. It can be sort of demoralizing, but I don't personally feel demoralized because it's like I'm alive and I have so many means at my fingertips, and I can continue to try to reach people and continue to formalize these ideas and work and make just increasing sense of this situation. But yeah. Someone asks if I'm a reader of Althusser. I think that's how you say his name. Althusser. I only read one essay by him, which was about doing theory in theory. But honestly, it was useful, and I learned some stuff in there about gauging whether certain engagements with theory are useful or not. But it was in a context, it was in like this big internet argument that I was in. That was the context for reading it, and I was reading it in the context of thinking about how unproductive the conversation was. And yeah, so that's all. I'm looking forward to, ideally, when I do a chill show like this, I would like to have people be able to call in ideological state apparatuses. What do you think is useful, or like why do you recommend it, basically? I'm just kind of trying to get in a habit of, when people recommend things to me, trying to get to the core of what is good about it, because that's part of what I want to provide with the show is, for example, I like this book, The Society of the Spectacle. I'm not going to recommend everybody read it. Instead, I'm going to try to do streams in the future where I try to get the essence out of it, squeeze the juice out of it that I like, and share it with everyone. So they say in the chat, it's related to a lot of what you talk about regarding controlling media, discourse, and institutions. Okay, yeah. I mean, that's I'm always trying to read some new stuff, but there is so much to read out there, so it can be an endless reading list. It's and they say it's a really great formulation of like abstractly how ideology forms subjects, whether or not they consent to it. Yeah, that the on that note, the main book that formed my perspective on that stuff was this one, Propaganda by Jacques Ellul, which takes I haven't read it in a while or reviewed it, but he describes propaganda in a broad sense as all those vectors which come to conform the population to a certain mode of life. And I really like that concept, and I think about it I think about this evolution post World War II in particular, where we are conformed onto a narrower and narrower collection of modes of life. It is a homogenizing event, and it's really happening all over the world. There's a homogenizing. They say it's because of your references to Debord and the Ellul book that I think you dig it. Cool. Yeah, I honestly I might have it right here. Yeah, let me see if it's in either of these books. Oh, hello, Hank. Cool. Nice. What does your username mean? Censor nihilist obstat, or censor nihil obstat. This has ideology and ideological state apparatuses in it, so I'll set it aside. Cool. But yeah, this would be a great time to just have somebody call in and chat. But that's for the future. I think that's for the near future. Now that I have this new computer, I can do a little multitasking without dropping mad frames. Yeah. Well, let me see. I think I will read something here that I've been meaning to reread if anyone is interested. Well, you know, I gotta do something on here. So I just want to read the preface to The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul, because I haven't read it in a while. So I'll read that in case anyone's curious. Yeah. And yeah, okay, yeah, I mean, I always check for the nihil obstat in Christian books. Oh, word. Oh, nice. That's funny. Yeah, I actually just found a cool Catholic book from Savers. It was called Catholic Paradoxes, and it's printed. Oh, I'll grab it. I'll see if I can get this debris off. It looks like it was maybe a Goodwill sticker or a thrift book sticker. I hate the thrift book stickers. I can't believe that they do that. They don't need to do that. At Goodwill, they have to because they put the price on the sticker. At thrift books, it's just pure... I don't even know what it is. So, all right, I guess that's a little cleaner. But yeah, this book's called Paradoxes of Catholicism by Benson, and this is from 1913, and it has a little Christmas gift to someone's father from 1913 for Pa. Merry Christmas, 1913 from Jim. And yeah, I guess you probably can't see that, but yeah. Cool. But yeah, this book seems very interesting. I think I will read this one soon, at least parts of it. So let me jump in here and do a quick reading of this introduction because I just want to review it myself, and I think we could all stand to hear some words from Jacques Ellul. So this is a note to the reader. I think the task of the reader will be lightened if at the outset I attempt a definition of technique. So this book in French is just called La Technique. The whole first chapter is devoted to making clear what constitutes technique in the present-day world. This is written in 1955 in France. But as a preliminary, there must be a simple idea, a definition. The term technique, as I use it, does not mean machines, technology, or this or that procedure for attaining an end. In our technological society, technique is the totality of methods rationally arrived at and having absolute efficiency for a given stage of development in every field of human activity. Its characteristics are new. The technique of the present has no common measure with that of the past. This definition is not a theoretical construct. It is arrived at by examining each activity and observing the facts of what modern man calls technique in general, as well as by investigating the different areas in which specialists declare they have a technique. In the course of this work, the word technique will be used with varying emphasis on one or another aspect of this definition. At one point, the emphasis may be on rationality, at another on efficiency or procedure, but the overall definition will remain the same. Finally, we shall be looking at technique in its sociological aspect. That is, we shall consider the effect of technique on social relationships, political structures, economic phenomena. Technique is not an isolated fact in society, as the term technology would lead us to believe, but is related to every factor in the life of modern man. It affects social facts as well as all others. Thus, technique itself is a sociological phenomenon, and it is in this light that we shall study it. And then there's a foreword from the author, and that is a few pages long, but I'll read it so anyone interested can watch it. Some of these streams are, they're not all bangers, basically. It's like sometimes you just gotta chill. And okay, so author's foreword to the Revised American Edition. This is all right. At the beginning, I must try to make clear the direction and aim of this book. Although descriptive, it is not without purpose. I do not limit myself to describing my findings with cold objectivity in the manner of a research worker reporting what he sees under a microscope. I am keenly aware that I am myself involved in technological civilization and that its history is also my own. I may be compared rather with a physician or a physicist who is describing a group situation in which he is himself involved. The physician in an epidemic, the physicist exposed to radioactivity. In such situations, the mind may remain cold and lucid, and the method objective, but there is inevitably a profound tension of the whole being. Although I have deliberately not gone beyond description, the reader may perhaps receive an impression of pessimism. I am neither by nature nor doctrinally a pessimist, nor have I pessimistic prejudices. I am concerned only with knowing whether things are so or not. The reader tempted to brand me a pessimist should begin to examine his own conscience and ask himself what causes him to make such a judgment. I think that's such a funny line, but it is true. To all the haters out there, begin to examine your own consciousness. For behind this judgment, I believe will always be found previous metaphysical value judgments, such as man is free, man is lord of creation, man has always overcome challenges, so why not this one too? Man is good, or again, progress is always positive. Man has an eternal soul, and so cannot be put in jeopardy. Those who hold such convictions will say that my description of technological civilization is incorrect and pessimistic. I ask only that the reader place himself on the factual level and address himself to these questions. Are the facts analyzed here false? Is the analysis inaccurate? Are the conclusions unwarranted? Are there substantial gaps and omissions? It will not do for him to challenge factual analysis on the basis of his own ethical or metaphysical presuppositions. The reader deserves and has my assurance that I have not set out to prove anything. I do not seek to say that man is determined or that technique is bad or anything else of the kind. Two other factors may lead the reader to the feeling of pessimism. It may be that he feels a rigorous determinism is here described that leaves no room for effective individual action, or that he cannot find any solution for the problems raised in the book. These two factors must now engage our attention. And I consider this highly relevant to the project of the show because he's doing a sociological analysis at that time. We are trying to do one at this time. And technique has only advanced and encroached deeper and deeper into our lives now. So, as to the rigorous determinism, feeling as if there's a rigorous determinism that leaves no room for effective individual action when we describe the technological situation. As to the rigorous determinism, I should explain that I have tried to perform a work of sociological reflection involving analysis of large groups of people and of major trends, but not of individual actions. I do not deny the existence of individual actions or of some inner sphere of freedom. I merely hold that these are not discernible at the most general level of analysis, and that the individual's acts or ideas do not here and now exert any influence on social, political, or economic mechanisms. By making this statement, I explicitly take a partisan position in a dispute between schools of sociology. To me, the sociological does not consist of the addition and combination of individual actions. I believe that there is a collective sociological reality which is independent of the individual. As I see it, individual decisions are always made within the framework of this sociological reality, itself pre-existent and more or less determinative. I have simply endeavored to describe technique as a sociological reality. We are dealing with collective mechanisms, with relationships among collective movements, and with modifications of political or economic structures. It should not be surprising, therefore, that no reference is made to the separate, independent initiative of individuals. It is not possible for me to treat the individual sphere, but I do not deny that it exists. I do not maintain that the individual is more determined today than he has been in the past, rather that he is differently determined. Primitive man, hemmed in by prohibitions, taboos, and rights, was of course socially determined, but it is an illusion, unfortunately very widespread, to think that because we have broken through the prohibitions, taboos, and rights that bound primitive man, we have become free. We are conditioned by something new. Technological civilization. I make no reference to a past period of history in which men were allegedly free, happy, and independent. The determinisms of the past no longer concern us. They are finished and done with. If I do refer to the past, it is only to emphasize that present determinants did not exist in the past, and men did not have to grapple with them then. The men of classical antiquity could not have found a solution to our present determinisms, and it is useless to look into the works of Plato or Aristotle for an answer to the problem of freedom. Keeping in mind that sociological mechanisms are always significant determinants of more or less significance for the individual, I would maintain that we have moved from one set of determinants to another. The pressure of these mechanisms is today very great. They operate in increasingly wide areas and penetrate more and more deeply into human existence. Therein lies a specifically modern problem. And he's talking about this in the 1950s in France, and it is so much more intense now, the determinisms that we face. And I think the primary, as I was talking about earlier, I think it's imperative that people grow up fast and really take hold of the situation. What is required there is a subtle, or is it subtle? I don't know. We are so heavily determined by our technological situation at this point and by our cultural situation in general, which Jacques, I think, would say it's a culture born of the technological society. So we are raised and we are brought up by our parents in a way that, and then brought up by the society, regimented by the institutions of the society, in a way that determines us in very, very penetrating ways, in ways that go deep into our soul. It's not at the surface level. It's not our ego deciding to do this or to do that. It is now even deeper than that. We have penetrated deep into the sub-personalities and the unconscious of people to start molding their decisions about how they're going to live their life. And that is the problem that I'm interested going forward. All right, I'll read some more of this. It's probably halfway there. This determinism has, however, another aspect. There will be a temptation to use the word fatalism in connection with the phenomena described in this book. The reader may be inclined to say that if everything happens as stated in the book, man is entirely helpless, helpless either to preserve his personal freedom or to change the course of events. Once again, I think the question is badly put. I would reverse the terms and say, if each one of us abdicates his responsibilities with regard to values, if each of us limits himself to leading a trivial existence in a technological civilization with greater adaptation and increasing success as his sole objectives, if we do not even consider the possibility of making a stand against these determinants, then everything will happen as I have described it, and the determinants will be transformed into inevitabilities. But in describing sociological currents, I obviously cannot take into account the contingent decisions of this or that individual, even if these decisions could modify the course of social development. For these decisions are not visible, and if they are truly personal, they cannot be foreseen. I have tried to describe the technical phenomenon as it exists at present and to indicate its probable evolution. Fatalism is not involved. It is rather a question of probability, as I have indicated what I think to be its most likely development. What is the basis for this most likely eventuality? I would say that it lies in social, economic, and political phenomena, and in certain chains of events and sequences. If we may not speak of laws, we may at any rate speak of repetitions. We may not speak of mechanisms in the strict sense of the word, we may speak of interdependencies. There is a certain logic, though not a formal logic, in economic phenomena which makes certain forecasts possible. This is true of sociology, and to a lesser degree of politics. There is a certain logic in the evolution of institutions which is easily discernible. It is possible, without resorting to imagination or science fiction, to describe the path that a social body or institutional complex will follow. An extrapolation is perfectly proper and scientific when it is made with care. Such an extrapolation is what we have attempted, but it never represents more than a probability and may be proved false by events. External factors could change the course of history. The probable development I describe might be forestalled by the emergence of new phenomena. I give 3 examples, widely different, and deliberately so, of possible disturbing phenomena. 1. If a general war breaks out, and if there are any survivors, the destruction will be so enormous and the conditions of survival so different that a technological society will no longer exist. 2. If an increasing number of people become fully aware of the threat the technological world poses to man's personal and spiritual life, and if they determine to assert their freedom by upsetting the course of this evolution, my forecast will be invalidated. 3. If God decides to intervene, man's freedom may be saved by a change in the direction of history or in the nature of man. But in sociological analysis, these possibilities cannot be considered. The last 2 lie outside the field of sociology and confront us with an upheaval so vast that its consequences cannot be assessed. But sociological analysis does not permit consideration of these possibilities. In addition, the first 2 possibilities offer no analyzable fact on which to base any attempt at projection. They have no place in an inquiry into facts. I cannot deny that they may occur, but I cannot take them rationally into account. I am in the position of a physician who must diagnose a disease and guess its probable course, but who recognizes that God may work a miracle, that the patient may have an unexpected constitutional reaction, or that the patient, suffering from tuberculosis, may die unexpectedly of a heart attack. The reader must always keep in mind the implicit presupposition that if man does not pull himself together and assert himself, or if some other unpredictable but decisive phenomenon does not intervene, then things will go the way I describe. And that is something I believe as well. I think we have there is an extreme significance to our decision making, just in our individual person in this world, especially now, even more so than compared with Jacques' time period. All right, a little bit more here. The reader may be pessimistic on yet another score. In this study, no solution is put forward to the problems raised. Questions are asked but not answered. I have indeed deliberately refrained from providing solutions. One reason is that solutions would necessarily be theoretical and abstract, since they are nowhere apparent in existing facts. I do not say that no solutions will be found. I merely aver that in the present social situation, there is not even a beginning of a solution, no breach in the system of technological necessity. Any solutions I might propose would be idealistic and fanciful. In a sense, it would even be dishonest to suggest solutions. The reader might think them real rather than merely literary. I am acquainted with the solutions offered by Emmanuel Mounier, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Ragnar Frisch, Jean Fourastier, The Realm of Fancy, and George Friedman, and others. Unfortunately, all these belong to the realm of fancy and have no bearing on reality. I cannot rationally consider them in analyzing the present situation. So like I said, I think that's a little bit different. I think things are, now we actually can propose possible futures because now there is a means of connecting globally. There's a computation power now put in people's hands that they didn't have access to. And I think if people are able to discipline themselves and connect themselves with each other, you can actually create alternative movements culturally moving forward in our society. And obviously, I don't think that that is easy to do or guarantees anything. But to not act like that is possible is to guarantee the determinism that would have us see Jacques' total domination of the human spirit in society. So I continue. However, I will not make a final judgment on tomorrow before it arrives. I do not presume to put chains around man, but I do insist that a distinction be made between diagnosis and treatment. Before a remedy can be found, it is first necessary to make a detailed study of the disease and the patient, to do laboratory research, and to isolate the virus. It is necessary to establish criteria that will make it possible to recognize the disease when it occurs, and to describe the patient's symptoms at each stage of his illness. The preliminary work is indispensable for eventual discovery and application of a remedy. By this comparison, I do not mean to suggest that technique is a disease of the body social, but rather to indicate a working procedure. Technique presents man with multiple problems. As long as the first stage of analysis is incomplete, as long as the problems are not correctly stated, it is useless to proffer solutions. And before we can pose the problems correctly, we must have an exact description of the phenomena involved. As far as I know, there is no overall and exact description of the facts which would make it possible to formulate the problems correctly. The existing works on the subject either are limited to a single aspect of the problem, the effect of motion pictures on the nervous system, for example, or else propose solutions without the requisite preliminary study. I offer these pages as a first effort in laying the necessary ground, but much more work will have to follow before we can see what man's true response is to the challenge before him. But this must not lead the reader to say to himself, all right, here's some information on the problem, and other sociologists, economists, philosophers, and theologians will carry on the work, so I have simply got to wait. This will not do, for the challenge is not to scholars and university professors, but to all of us. At stake is our very life, and we shall need all the energy, inventiveness, imagination, goodness, and strength we can muster to triumph in our predicament. While waiting for the specialists to get on with their work on behalf of society, each of us in his own life must seek ways of resisting and transcending technological determinants. Each man must make this effort in every area of his life, in his profession and in his social, religious, and family relationships. In my conception, freedom is not an immutable fact graven in nature and on the heart of man. It is not inherent in man and in society, and it is meaningless to write it into law. The mathematical, physical, biological, sociological, and psychological sciences reveal nothing but necessities and determinisms on all sides. As a matter of fact, reality is itself a combination of determinisms, and freedom consists in overcoming and transcending these determinisms. Freedom is completely without meaning unless it is related to necessity, unless it represents victory over necessity. To say that freedom is graven in the nature of man is to say that man is free because he obeys his nature, or, to put it another way, because he is conditioned by his nature. This is nonsense. We must not think of the problem in terms of a choice between being determined and being free. We must look at it dialectically and say that man is indeed determined, but that it is open to him to overcome necessity, and that this act is freedom. Freedom is not static, but dynamic, not a vested interest, but a prize continually to be won. The moment man stops and resigns himself, he becomes subject to determinism. He is most enslaved when he thinks he is comfortably settled in freedom. In the modern world, the most dangerous form of determinism is the technological phenomenon. It is not a question of getting rid of it, but by an act of freedom, of transcending it. How is this to be done? I do not know yet. That is why this book is an appeal to the individual's sense of responsibility. The first step in the quest, the first act of freedom, is to become aware of the necessity. The very fact that man can see, measure, and analyze the determinisms that press on him means that he can face them and, by doing so, act as a free man. If man were to say, "These are not necessities, I am free because of technique or despite technique," this would prove that he is totally determined. However, by grasping the real nature of the technological phenomenon and the extent to which it is robbing him of freedom, he confronts the blind mechanisms as a conscious being. At the beginning of this foreword, I stated that this book has a purpose. That purpose is to arouse the reader to an awareness of technological necessity and what it means. It is a call to the sleeper to awake. Nice. Wow, that fits so perfectly with my statement from earlier that we are asleep and we have about half a second to wake up before we get stabbed in the neck. So, yeah, and that is like a beautiful. Oh yeah, someone said that in the chat actually. So. Yeah, we just need to be building off of the work other people have done. He committed so much of his life to writing these works, trying to assess our situation and how we are determined by technological phenomena. And that is something that all these books from the 50s are not outdated. Like, don't read Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana, whatever. It's like, read this. Read actually old shit. And build the ground. Like, I don't know. And, you know, no shade, I guess. I'm not going to read the book because I skimmed through that book in person and it's like, okay, does she even care? Like, I don't know. It just feels so, it's like I genuinely believe Jacques was doing this with his whole life. And he believed that all of our lives were at stake. And it was so important to the freedom of man to assess these technological determinants. And I just don't see that with all the like pop type stuff. Obviously, there's important information in there, but they got that important information somewhere else. And we need to be digging around in the world, finding that information at the source and making sense of it. And of course, you know, I welcome the efforts of all people to try to synthesize that and spread the word on that, because that stuff changes people's minds, but it's not enough to read it and enjoy it. It's really something that we need to start living. So, yeah. I think I'll call it here. And the other thing about this, this episode is, or I'm on the new computer here, so I don't have my outro music. I forgot to put it on the new computer. And relatedly to that, I wonder if when I end broadcast or stop streaming, if it will be instantaneous, because I have encountered that before where I thought I was, you know, I say goodbye and I end it, but instead when I ended it, it cut the whole stream. So you never hear me say goodbye in that episode, I guess. You know, we're still figuring it out, but let's see here for a minute. I wonder, actually, let me check in here. Just since any reading I do tonight is good for me anyway. Authority and liberty. I'm curious if any of these, well, hang on. I won't read this whole thing. Yeah, so I highlighted this particular page, and I will just read this page from the introduction to Propaganda by Jacques Ellul as well, because I believe he saw these two works as two sides of the same coin. The technological society operates via this propaganda that conforms people to the mode of life that conduces the proliferation of the technological society. I don't know if I phrased that very well, but you get the idea. And I like this copy of this book. I got this on the street in New York before I was a bookseller, from a street seller, and someone wrote in the front here, "Dear Frank, Merry Christmas. Enjoy reading Jacques Ellul. He was a figure in my church where I grew up in Pessac, France. I don't know what this goodbye is. It doesn't look like au revoir. It looks like, yeah, all right, well, some form of goodbye that I'm unfamiliar with in there as well. But I think that is cute, and I'm glad this is my copy for that reason. All right, so I'll just read a couple pages from this because it's totally relevant, as I recall. I shall devote much space to the fact that propaganda has become an inescapable necessity for everyone. In this connection, I have come upon a source of much misunderstanding. Modern man worships facts. That is, he accepts facts as the ultimate reality. He is convinced that what is good. He believes that facts in themselves provide evidence and proof, and he willingly subordinates values to them. He obeys what he believes to be necessity, which he somehow connects with the idea of progress. This stereotyped ideological attitude inevitably results in a confusion between judgments of probability and judgments of value. Because fact is the sole criterion, it must be good. Consequently, it is assumed that anyone who states a fact, even without passing judgment on it, is therefore in favor of it. Anyone who asserts, simply stating a judgment of probability, that the communists will win some elections is immediately considered pro-communist. Anyone who says that all human activity is increasingly dominated by technology is viewed as a technocrat, and so on. This, I think, is also the 50s, maybe late 50s. As we proceed to analyze the development of propaganda, to consider its inescapable influence on the modern world and its connection with all structures of our society, the reader will be tempted to see an approval of propaganda. Because propaganda is presented as a necessity, such a work would therefore force the author to make propaganda, to foster it, to intensify it. I want to emphasize that nothing is further from my mind. Such an assumption is possible only to those who worship facts and power. In my opinion, necessity never establishes legitimacy. The world of necessity is a world of weakness, a world that denies man. To say that a phenomenon is necessary means for me that it denies man. Its necessity is proof of its power, not of its excellence. However, confronted by a necessity, man must become aware of it if he is to master it. As long as man denies the inevitability of a phenomenon, as long as he avoids facing up to it, he will go astray. He will delude himself by submitting, in fact, to necessity while pretending that he is free in spite of it, and simply because he claims to be free. Only when he realizes his delusion will he experience the beginning of genuine freedom. In the act of realization itself, be it only from the effort to stand back and look squarely at the phenomenon and reduce it to raw fact. Sorry, I'm going to reread that last sentence because I got tripped up. Only when he realizes his delusion will he experience the beginning of genuine freedom, in the act of realization itself, be it only from the effort to stand back and look squarely at the phenomenon and reduce it to raw fact. The force of propaganda is a direct attack against man. The question is to determine how great is the danger. Most replies are based on unconscious a priori dogmas. Thus, the communists, who do not believe in human nature but only in the human condition, believe that propaganda is all-powerful, legitimate whenever they employ it, and instrumental in carrying a new type of man. American sociologists scientifically try to play down the effectiveness of propaganda because they cannot accept the idea that the individual, that cornerstone of democracy, can be so fragile, and because they retain their ultimate trust in man. Personally, I too tend to believe in the preeminence of man and, consequently, in his invincibility. Nevertheless, as I observe the facts, I realize man is terribly malleable, uncertain of himself, ready to accept and to follow many suggestions, and is tossed about by all the winds of doctrine. But when, in the course of these pages, I shall reveal the full power of propaganda against man, when I advance to the very threshold of showing the most profound changes in his personality, it does not mean that I am anti-democratic. The strength of propaganda reveals, of course, one of the most dangerous flaws of democracy, but that has nothing to do with my own opinions. If I am in favor of democracy, I can only regret that propaganda renders the true exercise of it almost impossible. But I think it would be even worse to entertain any illusions about a coexistence of true democracy and propaganda. Nothing is worse in times of danger than to live in a dream world. Wow, that's relevant, for sure. To warn a political system of the menace hanging over it does not imply an attack against it, but it is the greatest service one can render the system. The same goes for man. To warn him of his weakness is not to attempt to destroy him, but rather to encourage him to strengthen himself. I have no sympathy with the haughty, aristocratic intellectual who judges from on high, believing himself invulnerable to the destructive forces of his time, and disdainfully considers the common people as cattle to be manipulated, to be molded by the action of propaganda in the most intimate aspects of their being. I insist that to give such warning is an act in the defense of man, that I am not judging propaganda with Olympian detachment, and that having suffered, felt, and analyzed the impact of the power of propaganda on myself, having been time and time again, and still being the object of propaganda, I want to speak of it as a menace which threatens the total personality. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, none of us can, it's not none of us can escape, but we can't, it ain't over till it's over. We are all in the propaganda machine. And all right, so yeah, I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna end the broadcast, and I'll give it a second here and take a drink in case it is, I just don't want it to cut off totally suddenly. But yeah, no outro music today. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll be back Monday night, 9 or 10 o'clock, something like that. And